Across the Perseid front, in the cold stretch between two unremarkable stars, floated the archive fortress of Zelthar, a structure older than half the civilizations in the Orion Arm. Towers of black alloy spiraled around a crystalline core, humming with the light of compressed knowledge. It was said the fortress held everything the Zelthar Dominion deemed sacred: war histories, genetic vaults, diplomatic libraries, and the Cipher. The Cipher was not simply data. It was legend, a multi-layered, quantum-entangled lattice of language, logic, mathematics, philosophy, and something else, something no species had ever understood. The Zelthar claimed it was unbreakable because it wasn't just a code. It was a proof of superiority, a map of how their minds functioned, a declaration of how far beyond others they truly stood, a message to the galaxy that no other species would ever stand on their level. For thousands of years, every rival empire, rogue collective, or curious scholar who attempted to decode even the first layer failed, sometimes slipping into madness, sometimes vanishing into recursive translation loops until their minds broke. The Zelthar enjoyed watching the attempts. It reaffirmed their belief that they were alone at the top. So when the humans arrived, new to the galactic stage, undisciplined, emotional, terribly young, the Zelthar laughed at the idea that these earthborn primates might challenge the Cipher. Humans were unpredictable, yes. Creative in strange ways, yes. But their brains were slow, unrefined, chaotic, perfectly unsuited for solving something as elegant and disciplined as Zelthar logic. So when the United Terran Research Division petitioned for observer access to the Cipher, not full access, not control, just permission to study the outer lattice, the Zelthar granted it with amusement. Let the primitive species try. Let them burn their neurons on a puzzle older than their continents. Dr. Mara Ellison had never been to an alien archive before. As the small human transport shuttle drifted toward the obsidian towers of the archive fortress, she felt something cold and electric glide down her spine. Not fear exactly, but scale. The sheer weight of how old, how vast, how impossible the structure was. Her assistant, Devin Hale, leaned toward the window. "Looks like someone crossed a cathedral with a battleship," he whispered. Mara smiled. "Then let's pray it's friendly." Their Zelthar escort stood silent in the center of the shuttle bay, tall and crystalline, its faceted skin reflecting the landing lights. Its voice vibrated the air more than it spoke. "Human specialists," it said. "Your request to observe the Cipher has been approved. You will be given a chamber, terminal, and limited guidance." "Thank you," Mara said with a respectful nod. "It is unlikely," the escort added, "that your minds will comprehend even the structure of the first veil. But the Dominion encourages ambition in youthful species." Devin frowned. Was that encouragement or an insult? Mara didn't take the bait. She simply adjusted the strap of her satchel. "Lead the way." They were guided through halls of humming light. Symbols glided across transparent screens as they passed. Symbols no human alphabet could resemble. Mara felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, but excitement. She had spent her life studying alien linguistics, neural pattern variation, and the strange gift humans possessed: cognitive improvisation. Where other species excelled in precision, humans excelled in intuition. Where others relied on logic, humans blended logic with instinct. And where others saw only what was, humans saw what could be. The Zelthar, for all their superiority, had never understood that. Finally, they were led into a circular chamber surrounding a floating prism of shifting violet energy. "The outer veil of the Cipher," the escort explained. "The simplest layer." Devin whispered, "If this is the simplest, I don't want to see the hardest." Mara stepped forward. She felt her breath catch. The Cipher wasn't a code. It was a heartbeat, a pulse of meaning layered on meaning, a language built to refuse translation, like a poem meant only for its creator. The Zelthar escort moved closer, almost gloating. "No civilization has ever broken even this veil. The structure is intentionally recursive. Attempts to decode it without Zelthar neural architecture will result in cognitive overload." Mara nodded. "Noted. You may begin," the escort said, gesturing dismissively. "Most scholars took weeks just to understand the interface. Some took months to map the first structural loop. Mara touched the display. It unfolded instantly. The Zelthar escort stared. Human, what did you just do? Just organized the nodes by emotional valence, Mara said casually. Your species coded the structure to reflect your own cognitive biases. So I'm sorting those biases. That is not possible. For you, she said gently. But humans evolved to read emotion from microexpressions and half-formed gestures. We're good at inference. The escort's crystalline skin brightened in irritation. You will not progress beyond this point. But Mara was already lost in the dance of symbols. Layer after layer, she rearranged, reconnected, inverted, restructured. Devon watched with growing alarm. Mara, you're moving too fast. Not too fast, she murmured. Just right. The escort tried again. No mind can. Mara tapped one final node. The room flashed. The outer veil dissolved. The cipher opened. Devon stumbled backward. The escort recoiled as if struck. And Mara stepped away from the terminal, breathing hard, eyes bright. Done. You? The Zelthar escort trembled, voice fracturing. You breached the veil. Mara nodded calmly. Overnight. The escort stared at her in silent, crystalline disbelief. The Zelthar escort stood frozen, crystalline plates shifting in a pattern that resembled disbelief. For beings who prided themselves on emotional control, this was the equivalent of shock. No species has ever unlocked the first veil, it whispered. No species has even understood the framework. Devon leaned toward Mara. Maybe don't poke the unbreakable alien ego any more than necessary. But Mara was already studying the now exposed lattice beneath the veil. This time she didn't reach for the display. She simply examined the flow of symbols drifting like luminous dust around the prism. The escort composed itself. A faint violet glow spread under its crystalline skin. Deep annoyance. Human Mara Ellison, it said. Your attempt ends here. The outer veil is merely a philosophical construct. The second veil requires quantum reflexive. Mara tilted her head. It's not a second veil, she said softly. It's a translation anchor. You built a scaffold that forces non-Zelthar minds into your metaphysical assumptions. The escort stiffened. You cannot possibly know that. Of course I can, Mara said gently. You coded your worldview into the structure. But you didn't hide the emotional patterns. You can't. They're instinctive, woven into the logic. Devon squinted at the floating lattice. I see triangles. Lots of triangles. Mara smiled. Triangles of perception. 3 ways of viewing each concept. Literal, existential, and relational. That's the Zelthar cognitive triad. The escort took a slow step back, as if reevaluating the creature standing in front of it. You decoded our cognition, it said. No, Mara corrected. I understood it. The escort's internal glow flickered. That is worse. Mara approached the central prism, and her voice lowered. You didn't build an unbreakable cipher. You built a mirror of yourselves. And mirrors aren't puzzles, just reflections. She reached out. The lattice swirled and shifted at her presence, as if responding to her intent. Devon whispered, You're scaring me a little. Mara exhaled slowly, her voice steady, calm. The second veil is rooted in Zelthar selfhood. So the translation key isn't logic, it's empathy. And she touched the lattice. Light blazed outward in a silent bloom. Symbols rotated, disassembled, and reformed around her hand. The great prism pulsed once and opened again. The second veil dissolved like mist under sunlight. Devon slapped his forehead. Why does everything with aliens turn out to be emotions? Mara shrugged. Because all minds grow from feelings before logic. The escort could no longer speak. It simply stared, broken, confused, humiliated. Humans weren't supposed to see through the cipher. They weren't even supposed to comprehend the structure. Yet Mara was unraveling it as if peeling shells off a fruit. Not with superior logic. Not with superior processing. But with something the Zelthar had never valued. the ability to adapt instinctively. The dereliction alarm pulsed through the fortress within minutes. Commanders arrived in a flurry of crystal and shadow, their bodies glowing with sharp, irritated light. Their angular faces remained hard and unreadable, their shame buried under layers of practiced detachment. High Archivist Veshkael, the overseer of the Cipher itself, studied Mara with a puzzling mixture of irritation and genuine fascination. "This is unprecedented," it said. "Explain, human." Mara stepped forward, calm as still water. "You built your cipher around your own limitations," she said. "You assumed all intelligence would mirror your linear, triadic logic. You assumed your emotional minimalism was an advantage. But humans learned differently." The archivist blinked, a ripple of light cascading down its crystalline spine. "You speak with confidence," it said, "yet you barely access more than a fraction of your brain capacity." "Think of it like this," Mara replied. "Zelthar cognition is a cathedral, perfect, consistent, structured. Human cognition is a workshop, loud, messy, improvisational. But in a workshop, you build things even a cathedral can't." The room fell silent. The archivist gestured to the cipher. "You unlocked the first veil overnight, and the second in minutes. Do you intend to continue?" Mara hesitated. Continue? The third veil was immense, a fractal storm of logic, philosophy, and memory spanning millennia. But she felt its pull. "Yes," she said softly, "if you allow it." The archivist paused for a long moment. Permission was not lightly given. Finally, it inclined its head. "You may proceed." The third veil was different. It was alive. The moment Mara touched the structure, she felt a sensation like stepping into deep cold water. Not pain, not fear, just depth. Infinite, layered, recursive. The lattice surged with light. Devon steadied her shoulder. "Mara, if this thing fries your brain—" "It won't," she whispered. "How do you know?" "Because it wasn't designed to protect knowledge. It was designed to protect pride." The symbols swirled faster. The room's lights dimmed. The fortress trembled as if the cipher itself recognized the intrusion. Zelthar commanders stood in rigid silence. The archivist muttered, "This is impossible." But Mara understood. This was the veil meant to break outsiders, to force them into the logical pathways only Zelthar minds could follow, to crush divergent thinking beneath the weight of millennia. Mara breathed out. Humans weren't made for rigid pathways. They were made to break them. She let the flow of symbols wash over her without forcing understanding. She didn't analyze. She didn't calculate. She felt. Humans evolved reading storms, landscapes, predators, emotions, chaos, all of it woven into the architecture of their minds. She moved through the cipher the way a musician feels a melody instead of reading it. Not with perfect precision, but with perfect intuition. And then, slowly, the cipher began adapting to her. Symbols softened. Patterns shifted tone. The fractal storm grew brighter and more fluid. Devon whispered, "It's responding to her." The archivist stepped forward, stunned. "It is changing its structure." Mara's eyelids fluttered as streams of meaning passed through her. Not as data, but as impressions. Feelings. Memories. Stories encoded in alien logic. The Zelthar had never imagined another species would navigate the cipher's emotional understructure. Because the Zelthar had forgotten something, emotion wasn't a weakness. It was a key, and humans had evolved holding that key in their hands. Mara reached the final node, touched it, and the cipher collapsed. Not destroyed, completed. A bloom of violet-white light filled the chamber. Crystalline walls reflected a million fragments of meaning. The third veil dissolved. The cipher, ancient, arrogant, unbreakable, now lay open. Every Zelthar in the room stared at Mara with something they had never felt before. Not anger, not denial, not pride. Awe. The archivist's voice trembled. "Human, what are you?" Mara stepped away from the prism, breathing hard but steady. "Just someone who sees differently." The archivist bowed, a gesture no outsider had ever received. And for the first time, it whispered, "The Dominion understands what it means to think like you." The chamber fell silent after Calyx's admission. Even the filtration vents seemed to mute themselves, as if the station itself understood the gravity of the moment. Jonas looked up from the cipher wall, calm, steady, thoughtful. "Calyx," he said gently, "I wasn't trying to shame you. I was trying to understand how your people think. That's all." But Calyx shook his head. "No, human. You have done more than understand. You have bridged what we believed could not be crossed." He stepped away from the shimmering lattice, his mandibles twitching in something close to awe. The cipher was not a test of skill. It was a proof of supremacy. Jonas blinked. "Supremacy?" "Yes," Calyx said. "To the Vekari, thought itself is our throne. Every alliance we forged relied on the belief that no outsider could challenge us on mental ground. We did not need weapons. We had intellect." He paused. "Until you. A rift opens." Later, inside the observation deck overlooking the starfold horizon, Calyx stood alone. The stars looked different now, less confident, more questioning. He didn't turn when he sensed Jonas approach. "I ran the numbers," Jonas said quietly. "Your cipher isn't impossible. But it is beautiful." Calyx allowed a soft, fluttering exhale, the Vekari equivalent of a weary sigh. "Jonas, do you know what your accomplishment will cause? Trouble, I assume?" "Reverberations," Calyx corrected. "The Vekari Council will not accept this. Not easily. They will demand an explanation. They will look for weakness. They will look for a flaw in you." Jonas shrugged. "I'm used to it." Calyx turned sharply. "Do not mistake them for human bureaucrats. They are scholars, yes, but they are also zealots of intellect. They will not tolerate their worldview cracking." Jonas stepped beside him, looking at the endless swirl of luminescent dust below. "Then maybe it's time it cracked." First contact with resistance. The summons came the next morning. A tremor spread through the station as the high-frequency chimes signaled a council arrival. Every Vekari froze mid-stride, mandibles locking in rigid precision. The council vessel docked with a hiss like 1,000 whispering blades. Jonas stood alone in the atrium as the delegates emerged, tall, silver-veined scholars with regal posture and eyes like polished obsidian. Their leader approached first, draped in ceremonial ribbons of logic script. "You," she said, voice smooth but vibrating with disapproval, "are the human who claims to have solved our cipher?" Jonas remained still. "Solved it, yes." The chamber gasped. Humans weren't supposed to speak so directly to the council. Calyx stood to the side, fearful but silent. "You expect us to believe," the counselor said, pacing in a slow circle, "that a species born on a dirt world, still wrestling with internal conflict, managed to unravel a framework that took our greatest thinkers 5 centuries to construct?" Jonas didn't blink. "Believe it or not, it happened." Her eyes hardened. "Demonstrate." They brought Jonas into a spherical chamber where the cipher was displayed in its rawest, most volatile form. Not the stable version Calyx had shown, but something deeper, alive, recursive. Calyx whispered urgently, "Jonas, this is not the same puzzle." "I know. It adapts. It resists. It learns from the solver." Jonas smiled faintly. "Good. So do I." The counselors stood on elevated platforms, watching with cold interest as the cipher pulsed in fractal spirals. A voice boomed, "Begin." The chamber dimmed. The cipher expanded. Its luminous tendrils reached toward Jonas's mind like questioning fingers. And Jonas answered, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with curiosity. He stepped closer, scanning patterns, noticing asymmetries, watching how it responded to his attention. Then, softly, he whispered something the council did not expect. "You don't want to be solved, do you?" The cipher's tendrils recoiled, almost startled. A ripple went through the chamber. Calyx looked stunned. Humans didn't treat puzzles like conquests. They treated them like conversations. and that was something no Vekari had ever considered. Jonas raised his voice slightly. You're not a barrier. You're a message. The cipher shifted tones, its lights deepening, its rhythm steadying, matching Jonas's breath. You were built to challenge, he continued, but also to teach, to guide, to evolve alongside the solver. He stepped into the very center of the lattice. Every Vekari recoiled in alarm. The cipher enveloped him in a cocoon of spiraling symbols. But Jonas didn't resist. He closed his eyes and listened. After several breaths, he touched one of the swirling glyphs. It dissolved not in defeat, but in relief. The cipher unfolded, not shattered, not overridden, but completed. A soft chime filled the chamber, pure and harmonious. The cipher shut itself down, and the room filled with stunned silence. The lead counselor stared, trembling with disbelief.
Impossible.
Her voice cracked. Jonas stepped forward. You made it impossible. We just stopped believing you. A murmur spread through the delegates. Frustration, awe, fear. Calyx lowered his gaze, mandibles trembling with emotion. Counselors, perhaps we must reconsider our assumptions. Quiet, the leader snapped, but her authority was gone. Every Vekari in the chamber had witnessed something they couldn't deny. A human had not only solved their cipher, he had understood its purpose better than they ever had. Later, in a quiet corridor, Calyx approached Jonas with a different expression this time. Not awe, not fear, but gratitude. Jonas, today you did more than think. You changed us. Jonas leaned against the wall. I didn't come here to change anyone. I just like a good challenge. Calyx made a soft clicking laugh. That is the human way, isn't it? Facing the unsolvable, until it yields. Jonas nodded. Problems aren't walls, Calyx. They're doors. You just need to find the hinge. Calyx looked at him with new clarity. Your species, you never see limits where others do. You never accept that something cannot be understood. You step into fear, into the unknown, and somehow, you walk out carrying the answer. Jonas paused. We try. That's all. And that is precisely why the cipher fell. Hours later, the council reconvened. Their leader addressed the station's population via holofeed. Her voice lacked its former steel. The human has accomplished what we believed no mind could. We acknowledge this openly, and we accept the consequences. Whispers erupted across the station. She continued, Today, Vekari intellect is not diminished. It is challenged and therefore strengthened. We will learn, we will adapt, and we will welcome this human as a peer. Gasps filled the hall. Humans had never been granted such status. Calyx turned to Jonas. You changed an empire in a single night. Jonas shrugged. I only solved a puzzle. As the station drifted beneath the glow of a newborn nebula, Jonas and Calyx stood in quiet reflection. Calyx, Jonas said softly, your people built something incredible, something alive. We built it to show our greatness, Calyx replied. You showed us greatness comes from something else. What's that? Calyx looked at him. Wonder, curiosity, the courage to question even your own assumptions. Jonas smiled. That's what makes us human. Calyx nodded. And today, for the first time, the galaxy understood. A gentle hum echoed from the distant stars, as if the universe itself agreed. What it truly meant to be human.